Hi everyone, welcome to Girls Getting Meaner, Strategies for Dealing with Middle and High School Bullying, brought to you by Simple K-12 and presented by Dr. Michelle Anthony. We are thrilled to have Michelle here with us today. She comes to us with so much experience. She is actually an author for a book called Little Girls Can Be Mean. I'll send that link out to you all in just a few minutes here. But she's joining us from outside of Denver, Colorado. She's a columnist. She's a feature writer for Scholastic Parent and Child magazine. She's also a certified teacher and holds a BA in education from Brown University, a Master's of Education in Child Studies, and teacher certificate from Tufts University, and a PhD in developmental psychology from the University of California in Berkeley. So lots of wonderful experience. Thrilled to have her here as one of our presenters. And a few quick announcements before we bring her back on. I'm here in the middle. I'm Grace from the Simple K-12 team. I'll be moderating Michelle's webinar today. And we do have lots and lots of upcoming webinars, lots of great topics always being added into the teacher learning community. You can see a full list of all of those sessions inside the webinars area. Be sure to register for as many as you can. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And for those of you who are here with us today, we just sent out a tweet from our Twitter account inviting our followers to join us. We'd love for you to do the same. I encourage you to retweet what we sent out or tweet something similar of your own. Just be sure to include that URL, which will allow your followers to join us. You can follow Michelle on Twitter. You can also tweet with us using the Simple K12 hashtag #SK12. And one more thing, we do have a back channel available. So for those of you that like to take notes, maybe you want to chat amongst yourselves and add in those additional resources, this is a place to do it. It is not mandatory, but a lot of fun. I recommend that you open up a separate tab or a separate web browser from your webinar so that you can see the two side by side. And keep in mind that we will have time for a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions at all for Michelle, please go ahead, use that GoToWebinar questions box, type your question in. I'm happy to ask her at the end of her presentation. And the panel does tend to auto-collapse, but if you look for that reddish-orange arrow, you'll be able to expand the panel back out and type your questions there. So let's go ahead and bring Michelle back on. Hi, Michelle.
Hi. Morning again.
Good morning. And Michelle, I'm passing the controls over to you now, okay?
Perfect. Thanks. And I'm going to collapse my orange bar.
All right, perfect. I can see your screen. Everything looks good.
There we go. Okay. Welcome back to those of you who are joining me again. I appreciate your time. And to new people who are arriving, thanks for getting up with us this morning. I'm on Mountain Time, so it's still relatively early there. I guess it's more towards lunch where most people are. But thanks for spending your time with me. We're going to talk today about Girls Getting Meaner, strategies for dealing with middle and high school bullying, as the title indicates, mostly with girls. But you'll also hear me talk about how some of the stuff that's happening with girls is also now happening with boys, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we get started. I have so much information I want to share. I'm a little nervous about my time frame, so forgive me if I talk a little quickly, but hopefully you can always go into the community and watch it twice. I won't talk that fast, but there's just a lot of information I'm hoping to share. This is just a little bit about me, not really important stuff, other than that I come at this from both a professional angle and a personal angle. I have 3 children under the age of 13, 2 girls and a boy, although my oldest daughter is going to be 13 in a matter of weeks. So my goals today are to help us develop a new framework related to identifying relational aggression and social cruelty as it relates to teens. And if those words are either new or unfamiliar to you, no worries. We'll talk about that a lot during the webinar. To understand the developmental nature of meanness. And for me, this is especially important when we talk about middle school and high school girls, because what we tend as adults to want to do is to prevent all meanness that happens. And I love that instinct, and I wish the world were the kind of place where that were, number one, possible, but even if it was, number two, beneficial, because there is some really important benefits to meanness, developmentally speaking, and I want to touch on those today so that when we understand the role that it serves that's beneficial, we can try and tap into the benefits while mitigating some of the negative effects that we are all too familiar with. Learn and apply a four-step process to helping girls face and resolve friendship struggles and girl bullying. And understand the role that caring adults can play. And your role may be as a teacher, it may be as an administrator. Obviously, a lot of you are wearing dual hats, and you're also parents. You may be aunts to girls. You may be uncles to people. You may just be, a Girl Scout leader or the coach of a, of a team that these kids are on. So there's lots of roles that we play in the lives of children, and how can we use our roles to the benefit of kids as they develop. So when we look at the effects of bullying on education, especially at the middle and high school level, we're talking about a very profound effect. There are hundreds of thousands of kids who miss school because of fear or intimidation. We have a majority of teens who witness bullying at least once a day. It was funny, the other night, Grease was on television, and my husband and I were watching the beginning of it, and it was incredible to see some of the things that were being portrayed on the screen of looking up girls' skirts, and just a lot of behavior that now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but wouldn't be tolerated and laughed about in the same way. So certainly it's a problem that we recognize much more often, we attempt to address, but especially middle and high school, these are big places. The kids are unsupervised at least portions of the time, and certainly outside of school there's a lot less supervision for students this age. So when we look at what happens with kids, there's no surprise when we connotate bullying that we think of those middle school or early high school girls and how mean they can be in our present day world. But when we look back in time, when we think about the research on aggression that started in the 1960s, what we found was that the reports of research were all on how aggressive boys were, and that girls were not aggressive at all. Okay, at all, that's probably not a correct, accurate reflection, but there was a preponderance of aggression among boys, and there was not nearly the amount of aggression among girls. And when in the 1990s, a group of female researchers began to examine the data, what they found was that the definition of aggression led to those results, and that is that aggression was defined by physical acts of violence or physical acts of aggression, punching, hitting, knocking down, kicking, that kind of thing, and girls were much less likely to engage in those types of behaviors. However, when they developed a new framework of studying aggression, what they found was that girls were equally as aggressive as boys. And the definition that they were using to define aggression as it related to girls was what made the difference. So the term that was being used, and that is currently used, is relational aggression. And if you just think of what the word means, it's aggression inside relationships. So this list of items, cruel words, exclusion, rumor, gossip spreading, we could add to this list of what might be considered relational aggression and the kinds of behaviors that we see kids engage in. What's interesting is that when they did the first studies in the 1990s, they found that the preponderance of relational aggression occurred with girls and the preponderance of physical aggression occurred with boys. Now, we do hear more reports of female physical aggression, that the incidences have increased for sure. But more dramatically, there's been an increase in relational aggression among boys. And the reason that this is true is because of our diligence in schools of being more proactive at physical aggression and not allowing it to happen, punishing it when it does, being more alert, being more aware. I'm not saying schools are perfect, because we know they aren't. But certainly the awareness level is much higher now than it was even 10, 15 years ago, certainly before Columbine happened. But that aggression is not disappearing, because aggression is a natural phenomenon that, that children experience. And that aggression that can no longer be demonstrated physically among boys is now being displayed relationally with increasing numbers among boys. So when we look at the notion that friendship struggles might be equal to social cruelty, which might be equal to relational aggression and bullying, it's an uncomfortable position because beating someone up on the playground is not the same as not inviting them to your birthday party or pointing at them in the lunchroom and laughing. I think we have to acknowledge as adults that there's a distinction there. But if we come from the perspective of the person who's experiencing the situation, it can feel the same. There's actually research on the brain and how the brain responds to physical pain and how it responds to emotional pain, and it lights up the same areas of the brain. So what we're finding is that the pain that's experienced from friendship struggles can affect the individual in the same way that the pain can be experienced by physical bullying. So I'm not equating these literally, but I'm using them as a framework that we can equate so that we can understand the experience from the perspective of the person in the situation. When kids start middle school, when they leave elementary school, developmentally they enter a new era, if you will. They try out power and influence in public ways within groups much more often. Now this is of course a trajectory. I'm not saying in 5th grade they don't do it, in 6th grade they do. We're really talking about a spectrum of behaviors, but the intensity of the behaviors increase around 6th grade, around the age of 12 and 13. That intensity will increase and increase and increase until about 9th or 10th grade, and then it will begin to drop off when kids reach a place of developmental maturity that we'll talk about. So they're trying out power and influence in public ways. They're shifting from adults to peers as the center of their social world, as the center of their informational world. The social culture takes over and community norms become central. And the community norm could be very specific to a group, a clique. It could be specific to a school. It could be specific to a larger community. So you can get ethnic and gender variations here. You can get socioeconomic variations here, but you can also get within a particular group in a school, there's an ethos, there's a way of doing things that wouldn't be true of a different group in a different school, but that social culture of that group can become paramount for the members both within it and without it. Because a lot of group membership is defined by who's not in the group, who's excluded from the group, and that defines who's in the group. And it's an important distinction to understand when we look at dynamics among girls at this age. The here and now trumps an unimaginable future. We can talk to kids and they can talk to us about when I'm 19 or when I'm 25, when I go to college, when I get married, but the emotional experience is present tense only. If you talked to my almost 13-year-old daughter about something that she's very upset about in this exact moment right now, there's just no way for her to put herself outside of that moment for 15 minutes later when she's actually completely forgotten about it. Be aware and beware of being played. This is the age of girl manipulation of adults, where the sweetest and the most responsible of girls can actually be the meanest kid in the school. And part of her power is the way that she manipulates adults that they never suspect, that they put her in positions of power, they put her in positions of other kids not being able to come to them because no one would actually believe this very nice, very responsible girl could actually be this mean. And it's really important as adults, as teachers, as administrators, to get a sense of the kids' experience of the kids and not just our experience of the kids, because who they show us and who they show their peers can be very, very different. At high school, we find Erik Erikson's stage called Identity versus Role Confusion. This is the time when kids begin to define their values. They want to find their own identity. They struggle with social interactions. They grapple with moral issues. It's actually a really controversial but wonderful time to bring current events into the classroom for those of you who teach like social studies or English, and to fortify some of what you're learning in terms of traditional texts with what's going on in the world today, because at this age there's so much questions, so many questions these kids have about what's moral, what's right, where do they fit in. Their most significant relationships are with peers, and they're trying to figure out how to be powerful within relationships. And here's where, developmentally speaking, it's actually quite important for some meanness to happen, because if we don't try out different roles, if we don't see how assertive can I be, how aggressive can I be, where are the boundaries of what I stand up for myself, if kids don't test that out, by definition, they're being walked on by other people who are. And my biggest worry is for the girls who never stand up for themselves, who never are mean. The parents who come to me and say, oh, my child couldn't hurt a fly, and I think, wow, poor thing, because in your teenage years, in your adolescent years, you have to be able to stand up to your peers in some context. You have to be able to stand up to the opposite gender in some context. And we really want kids to figure out how to do this. So as adults, we want to provide the structure and safety for them to test the limits while defining the parameters of what's socially acceptable. And therein lies the rub. So once we know and understand where meanness comes from, developmentally speaking, then we have a very important role in trying to mitigate it. So who's at risk for being bullied or becoming a bully? Those without a socially appropriate outlet for aggression. As I mentioned earlier, aggression is a natural drive. When you try and squash it, all you do is, what's a good example? If you think of those water balloony kind of water tubes, when you squish it, it just slides through your hand. That's kind of like what happens when we try and squish and repress aggression, is it slides through our hands and it manifests in another form. So what we don't want to do is try and block it in one way and have it come out in a way that's even less desirable. And we'll talk about what we can do about that in a minute. Those with an inner competitive drive or need to be on top, these are those uber competitive kids. Everything is a contest. Everything is a race. It happens with girls. It happens with boys. It happens with everyone. Those with the limited framework of understanding bullying, of thinking that this is what bullying looks like. It's when someone beats you up. So what's going on with me and these girls who are cruel to me night and day, that's not bullying. So they are a part of a system. I'm not saying that all they're to blame, but they're a part of a system that they don't even know how to navigate because they don't realize that they're inside of it. And obviously, social outcasts, kids who, for whatever reason, just don't have a friend. If kids have a friend, they have a good friend. It could be in school, it could be out of school. If kids have a reliable friend, they tend to be okay. They don't have to have 50 friends. They don't have to be the popular kid on the block. They need a good, stable, reliable friendship. Those kids, as unhappy as they might be and as they might say, I have no friends, if they have a good, stable relationship of friendship, they're not a social outcast. A social outcast is someone who can find no friends, fits into no groups, is always on the outside looking in, and can't find a place where they feel comfortable inside their own skin. I think we pretty much described every adolescent. So every adolescent is at risk to bully or be bullied. So what can we do? The first thing that we can do as caring teachers and adults is to understand the importance of aggression, developmentally speaking. That's a very, very vital way for kids to learn how to assert themselves and to find their individuality. So we want to welcome aggression in appropriate forums. If we give them appropriate forums, then we can help mitigate and prevent aggression from coming out in these less appropriate forums. So here are some ways to do that. Sports provide a socially appropriate outlet for aggression or competition or need to be on top. And I really want to expand what we think about when we think about sports. Yes, of course, there's soccer and lacrosse and just the classic things we think of with group sports. But sports really does go beyond that. You think of hybrid teams like fencing, swimming, tennis, track. These are where individuals are competing as themselves. You know, if you're in a swim meet, it's you against the other person whose time is faster, but they're also part of a team. So in this way, these are hybrid teams. It's a tennis match between two people, but it's part of a team. There's also individual sports and activities, things like karate, laser tag, yoga. These are fantastic ways to release aggression. When you have those kids who are not sports-minded, they don't want to be part of a team, they don't have time to be part of a team, they've got other activities, what about yoga? It is a fabulous way. There's so much release of aggression, and it's individual, and it can fit in night or day. So I want to expand our minds for ways that we can help kids plug in at school and beyond school. Because one of the things you're going to hear me talk about is that a lot of our role as teachers is as mentors to these kids. And to be that ear and to be that voice that they need, not because they don't have parents, but because parents to them are less accessible. Additional outlets, to do this are through video games and moderation. I am always afraid when I say this because there really is legitimate concern about the aggression that video games can cause. And a lot of that legitimacy comes from putting the player in a first-person shooter role. So when you're the one who's massacring everybody as part of the game, there is a legitimate and substantiated by research concern of an increase in aggression. That's not the type of game I'm talking about. I'm talking about using video games to control for violence, that are controlled for violence, and that kids aren't spending 24/7 doing because absolutely there are addictions to video games. So I put this up there. I know there's a caveat. I know that we're talking about a particular kind of kid who would be successful doing this, but for that kid, this is important. For the kids for whom this is a disaster, this is not the choice to make. But we want to be thinking about all different kinds of kids. Artistic outlets, things again we might not think of in relation to aggression, which has to do with music, playing the drums, playing the piano. Think about hitting those keys. Art, either the content of the art or the means to do it. So sculpture, jewelry making, thinking about the twisting, the turning, painting with those gross motor movements, sculpting when you're squishing clay. If you're looking for physical aggression, this is a great way to help kids have an outlet that fits in with their personality. Competitions for competitive drive, so there's art competitions. So for some kids it's less physical and it's more that need to compete. So we're thinking about the individual and what their needs are. There's academic competitions, especially in high school, math teams, writing contests, lots of ways to get out that competitive drive, even chess tournaments. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're working with the child in front of us. So if they're artistic, they're artistic. If they're academic, they're academic. If they're athletic, we have an outlet for all of these different kinds of kids. When we want to deal with meanness, oops, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Let me go back to that. That's a reminder for me. We have a new framework where we want to create a mentor relationship. This is so important for kids this age. Everything we teach them, our roles and responsibilities as teachers, I in no way want to undermine that. But so vital for kids to know that they have a mentor, that they have someone who listens, someone who can hear what they're saying. In class, our time's so limited, our curriculum is very prescribed. One of the best ways that you can make a difference is by being the person who someone can either come to or who will just listen to them, will notice what's going on, will see the social dynamics outside the classroom as much as inside of the classroom. So the first step is to observe. We're going to connect, guide, and support to act. And let me break that down and show you what I mean. When I say observe, it's like being a fly on the wall. This is you in your classroom. This is you in the hallway. This is you on your way to the restroom. These are the things that you hear from other kids about kids that you care about. So who is this child socially? Are they passive? Are they aggressive? Have things changed for them? Are they avoiding things? Are they complaining more about not feeling well? Are they missing class? Are they coming late? Are they sort of leaving in the middle of class to go to the nurse? All of those kinds of things we're observing. The nice thing about this four-step process at this age is that the kids can begin to do it themselves when you sort of give them the framework. So for them, this would look like them observing their own social circle. Who has the power in their social group? What part do they tend to play? It gives kids so much permission instead of constantly feeling barraged by social events and barbs going on around them, to instead watch what's happening. Be a third-person reporter. They can even pull out a little notebook and just take notes to give themselves some perspective on their own experience. Are there other background considerations? Did a parent get divorced? Did someone go back to work? Are they moving? You know, there's lots of things that can be going on in kids' lives that actually don't relate to their social group that can impact them in profound ways. One of the most important steps, particularly at this age, particularly in your role as a teacher, is to connect. Where we want to connect versus correct. They get so much lectures from their parents, from what they know they should do, that connect versus direct. Just listen to what's happening to them, experience the world through their eyes, and understand what it is that they are going through. What are they feeling? What do they wish could happen? I notice. Starting a sentence with I notice allows them to either reflect and say, no, I don't think that's right, or I noticed that too and I don't know what to do. Here we can share stories. What's so important for these kids to know is, number one, they're not alone, and number two, you can get through it. for so many of these kids, like the here and now, this is all there is. This is all there will be. It will always be like this. And as I said, it's very hard for them to hold on to the future. But hearing about it from someone they respect gives them the hope that something else could happen. And that empathy of understanding the world from their perspective, that is so important for kids this age. And then we can guide them. We can help connect them with community members if that's appropriate. We can talk to them about what the possibilities are, looking for their input, supporting things that they may need, like learning how to stand up to a friend or learning how to ignore certain behaviors and move through an environment. They may need to role play. They may need some support in how to do that. And when you're in a mentor relationship, this is the perfect time and perfect way to do that. Giving them control, because ultimately they have to go back into their social circle without you, without the parent on their own. So making sure it's more than a good idea, but it's something that they are able and willing to go and do. So when we look at supporting them to act, see, we take baby steps and have them decide on public versus private action. So often kids this age, they feel like everything has to be big, everything has to be decided, everything has to be immediate, it has to happen right now, and helping them realize that there are ways that they can do what they want and get what they need without it having to be public. Can they write a hate letter and not actually send it? Because they get all those feelings out, they say what they wish they could say, but actually might be quite disastrous to actually say or actually send or put in an email, heaven forbid. But they still get the experience of feeling that release and feeling like they did exactly what they wanted to do, exactly the way they wanted to do it without any social repercussions. So supporting them to recognize that distinction, to choose one or two things that feel manageable to them in this moment. Everything feels so overwhelming in these ages that to find something that's manageable, that's achievable to them is a victory. Even if looking at it from a third-party perspective, it doesn't seem big. It's very big for kids to be able to take small steps, because when you're paralyzed, a small step is actually a giant leap. This is where we become interested but not overly invested, and where we can gain new information from kids when they go through experiences. Life is complicated, so we can do any one step. We don't have time in our day to sit and go through an hour-long process. We have 5 minutes, and 5 minutes is enough to listen. 5 minutes is enough to check in. 5 minutes is enough to do a quick role play with kids. And we can come back when we make a mistake or when they need additional support. We can do that at any point in time. We don't have to start over again from the beginning and feel like we're in a position of having to do too much. I know I'm about to run out of time, but I did want to talk a little bit about technology and the media and scale of influence and isolation of experience for these kids, because you're walking down the road and you're getting a text that's so mean and you're by yourself and you're totally isolated, and yet you're completely public and exposed, and it is so difficult for kids. Their virtual social lives deal with groupthink. There's no room for individuality, or you won't be part of the group. It's so important to put on a persona online, on Facebook, through your text. It's not the real you. It's the person you're creating. And it's very confusing to kids to have these two lives that are surrounding you 24/7. This is so different from anything that we experienced as kids. And there's pressure from all sides. There's pressure to do right. There's pressure to not do right. There's pressure to be part of the group. There's pressure not to be part of the group. It is a tremendous burden for these kids, and it often leads to cyberbullying, because the internet is a public place. And I think for kids, it feels like I'm DMing, I'm IMing, I'm texting, it's between me and someone else. And what they don't realize is that the internet is public, and our emphasis in our classrooms when we do projects on the internet as teachers and administrators is that nothing is private, everything is public. An IM can be sent everywhere, a DM can be sent everywhere, a text can be sent everywhere. There's nothing private. And so much of internet relationships are these groups of people. You have 4 girls who are sending a text to 4 boys who are all talking about it, and helping to emphasize that relationships are between 2 people. No matter who else is around can help them hone back into what it is that they want, as opposed to that group think of what my group wants. And to understand that in your classroom, in your school, and hopefully for them at home, media access is a privilege, not a right, and that in that sense, they may not have everything that they are seeking if they don't use it responsibly. And possibly the most important is to know that cyber victims often become cyber bullies because really nice kids get fed up and they lash out, and it's such an anonymous and private way to lash out that they can often make a choice that has horrible repercussions for them. One of the little phrases, and I apologize, I don't know where I got it from, but once you hit send, it will never end. So once it's off your plate, you text something, you send a picture, even if you're part of a chain, you've lost total control, and the things that you do, you are held accountable for, even if you did it because everything that had been done to you before. So I know I told you I was going to be tight on time, but I think I squeezed in under the wire, and I'm happy to answer any questions and stay late.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but you did a fantastic job.
Thanks.
Now for our attendees, if you have any questions for Michelle, please go ahead, type those in the GoToWebinar questions box. I'm happy to get to those. As Michelle said, if we need to stay just a couple of minutes extra, that's no problem at all. Just I want to point out a couple of things real quick here, and then we'll get to those questions. Now, for those of you, if you asked about any additional topics on school safety, on bullying, anything of that sort, I want to encourage you to go into the teacher learning community for your course catalog. Go ahead and look for school safety. It has its own category here. We do have a lot of great additional topics that touch on these related items. Also, we are recording this webinar. It will be available inside the on-demand section inside of the community, hopefully within the next 1 to 2 business days. You'll see that under the on-demand tab. Please consider leaving a review for Michelle. We do appreciate that member feedback, which is wonderful for other members and also for our presenters as well. Now, we do have all of our presenters. They have a bio area inside the presenters tab. It's a great place to learn more about Michelle, to watch additional webinars that she's presented for us. You can send her a personal message by connecting with her inside of the teacher learning community. I notice I don't have her as a connection now, so I'll go ahead and do that. But you can send her a message if you think of anything later on. You can also, of course, watch those recordings and register for her upcoming sessions. Whew, I think I covered all of the basics there. And let me go ahead and pull up the questions box here and the PowerPoint with her contact information. Okay, so this came in from Joyce, and Michelle, she wrote in, can aggression and change from parent influence to peer influence occur at a much earlier age due to an increased number of significant adults in the child's life who perhaps are lacking parenting skills?
Can you ask the first part of the question again?
Sure. She wanted to know, can aggression and change from parent influence to peer influence occur at a much earlier age?
Are you saying can aggression and change, C-H-A-N-G-E?
Yes.
Okay. So if I understood the question correctly, and tell me if I didn't, you're asking if parents have weak parenting skills, can we see a lot of this aggression directed socially earlier in school than middle school? Is that correct?
I believe that is what she's asking, yes.
Okay, absolutely. And I think part of what the research has shown is we used to pretty much essentially have 5th grade through 10th grade as our years of female relational aggression. And what we found is, unfortunately, it happens younger and younger. Is it solely because of weak parenting? Obviously not. But there is the role of the media there. There's the role of what people call that squish down curriculum, where kids who used to do it 13 now do it 10. What they used to do at 10, they now do it 7. So there's a lot more of that pressure to grow up and that pressure to act in ways and assert yourself in ways and find yourself in ways that typically were older for kids. But the role of parents, which I think is what you're asking about, is tremendous, where it's not unusual to find a certain kind of parent with a certain kind of kid. And the hard part for teachers is it's very hard to reach that child because you can't reach that parent. That parent is they have a wall around them, around what behaviors are acceptable, what behaviors they're able to see in their child. And I think most of us who have been teachers have met that parent and know the difficulty we have in helping a child who comes from that kind of family.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. And I saw a few comments that were inside the Titan Pad that I just wanted to share. And it said, Joyce had written in that sometimes artwork can basically uncover any hidden aggression. And I think another member, might have been Veronica, said that writing might also perhaps.
You know, not only are they're incredible points, and they're absolutely right, but they also become tools. So thank you for making those points, and I should have had it in the presentation, which is that writing is a great outlet for aggression. Artwork is a great outlet for aggression. It's also a great way to read what's going on with kids. They don't realize sometimes the things that they're thinking that they put into their art and in their writing. Another really nice way to help kids begin to talk about some of these issues that in a less threatening way is through characters and stories, and what the character is going through and what the character feels and some of the struggles the character is having. Kids will put themselves into those characters and won't even realize some of the things that they reveal in their discussions of books and stories.
Absolutely. And I don't see any additional questions, but Michelle, thank you so much for being here with us. And for anyone who is watching this as a recording, or if you're an attendee and you think of something later on, please don't hesitate to contact us, contact Michelle. We're happy to get those questions answered for you. And thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I look forward to the next webinar.